Welcome to Jackson Snyder Presents, produced by the Vero Essene Yahad. This recording is the continued discussion of Jack versus the Scab Man. It would be best if you went back and listened to that one first. It was the story of an encounter with I don't know what it was. And then come back and listen to the discussion. This recording has been modified to fit a limited time period.
You are about to experience Jackson Snyder Presents. We will examine the life of our master Yeshua by discovering his ancestors, family, and friends, by reviewing rare ancient manuscripts, and speaking to those who know him best. From the Vero Essene Yahad, now experience Jackson Snyder Presents.
Sean, did you have a near-death experience when you went to the hospital this week?
No, I did not. Actually, it was hopefully not that big of a deal, but more of a precaution than anything serious.
Sure. I thought you might be going in there just so you could have one for the Tuesday night talk.
That would have been something, huh?
Yeah. Do you know anybody that's had a near-death experience?
I do know a few Army buddies of mine that have had them, but none of them were believers. And only one that I can remember had any kind of a story, and it was just a typical, the hallway light at the end, and then he was revived. So
I really don't think that that's dying and coming back. I think that it's something less than dying, because when you die, you can't come back unless somebody resurrects you. You think?
Oh, yeah, I'd agree with that. I think it's part of just being fearfully and wonderfully made. I think it's just a biochemical way that Yahweh created us to, maybe ease the way to death, basically.
Another good question we might take up is there's a little kind of a contradiction in the scriptures between the Gospels and Paul. John, for instance, makes it very clear that Yeshua is resurrected in the body. He asks for food. He's showing them that he's eating, that he's has subsistence, that he is flesh. And then he walks through the wall. So it's teaching you there that this is a resurrection, a bodily resurrection of the dead. Then we have Paul that talks about more like a resurrection of the spirit, or the continuation of the spirit in 1 Corinthians 15. And today, especially the scholarly type believers like James Tabor doesn't believe in a bodily resurrection, but a spiritual resurrection, which I'm not quite sure what that means. If you're born again of spirit, then it wouldn't be a resurrection, but your spirit would just go on. So what do you think? Bodily or spirit?
I think both. I think Paul and John are speak of the same thing. I don't really see a difference. I think that it's I don't think spiritual necessarily means ghostly. I think we often think of spiritual things as being non-corporeal or ghostly. I think spiritual is just different than physical. I believe there's physical components to it. We have definite our Bibles are full of testimonies of physical angelic beings that interact physically with things, and then we also have the spiritual aspect of it too. So I think to me, once we get in that realm, I can't imagine there would be any kind of we would be able to freely go back and forth and interact with both worlds, just like the sons of God did, even in Job, and that's just kind of my conjecture on it, I guess.
Okay, so both. Well, what I see it is that the spiritual body and the physical body are in some ways connected. That is to say, like I mentioned last week, Carl Sagan, he really made it for me in what he said. And of course, he wasn't a believer that we know of, but that he said, if a fourth dimensional being exists, then he would be able to materialize any place, anytime, just for you, walk through walls, walk through doors, and tear you apart from inside to out. And I thought, yes, that's right. A spiritual body would certainly have weight if that spiritual person determined that they wanted to demonstrate themselves in flesh. Well, that's what I've read. That was the main reason that Yahshua comes and eats. He eats fish. He eats something else in John. And there's a piece of John that was left out. He said, see that he eats something, and he says, see that I am not a bodiless demon. Have you ever seen that alternative reading?
I have, yes.
Yeah, it's supposedly from the Gospel of the Hebrews, but I can really see that, especially these days. So what are ghosts? We can't deny that they don't exist. They do exist. What are they?
I think they're demons. I don't believe that people's souls are disembodied and walking around the earth. I don't think that's the case. I think they're demonic beings, and they're posing as either, loved ones or whatever else, kind of like Simon Magus did in the Nazarene Acts.
Yeah, I think you're right. I would say that same thing. And they've maybe been living in a family line for so long, and then the last host dies, and they come out and maybe take the place of that particular person. So when they have these seances and truly demons manifest and they can answer questions, well, why wouldn't they be able to? They've been living in that body until that body just died.
Well, I just wrote in chat, all these ancient, I was talking to my wife about this today, actually. We were talking about the ancient ruling families of the world, and, the Illuminati kind of guys, if you buy into that. But, these are ancient families, and if you do the research into them, they go back a long, long time, and they always have had power, and they're always involved with like Masonic things and Babylonian type stuff. And, these people are, the Crowleys and those kind of people, those people are demon filled. Those aren't just bad people. These people are filled with multiple demons probably. So, and who's to say these family members, they stick to strict, marriage, with these, they only take certain people within their bloodlines and things, and they're very careful about that. But also, of course, these demonic things, but why leave such a comfortable, quote unquote, host, with all this power and money? And they're, it's just, to me, it's just totally demonic.
Absolutely. I was thinking about that when I did that last message about what Yahshua says about casting out demons after the, I think it was in context of those pigs that went over the cliff, but he says that they wander through dry places. And I'm thinking that, okay, where do they go? Where do they go? If they've got to find a home and they haven't been sent to the abyss, where do they go? They're going to probably go looking for the weakest vessel that they can find. That is maybe a child, or maybe a person in a nursing home that's a quadriplegic. They can't do anything, and take over those people. So all the more reason that if you're going to be casting out a demon, then you better send it someplace. I was taught to send a demon to the feet of Yahshua for him to do with as he will, or another teacher says, send them to the abyss. Or if their host isn't a believer, threaten to send them to the abyss to get them to settle down, because you can't cast something out of a non-believer unless you can also have them consent to believing. Else either that demon will come right back and bring some more with it, or that person might not be able to function without that demon.
It makes me think about these, if you think like the conspiracy side of it, and, with the cloning and things like that, if they're cloning sheep publicly back in the 70s, let's not be foolish. They're certainly doing humans in some crazy lab somewhere. Yeah. But what a perfect thing for a demonic possession, just an empty created humanoid shell, just waiting. You could just fill it. It's empty. You can just fill it with anything. I mean, I often think of that, because I have no doubts that they're cloning things that we don't even know about, I'm sure. So it's kind of like the Nephilim.
Yeah, I call them spiritless humans. And here's why. Going over to John 3, through 17, and that is that people are not born spiritually alive, except there are some exceptions that I don't want to get into. They're born spiritually dead. Ephesians chapter 2 says that as well, that they're dead, spiritually dead. And in order to reclaim what was lost by Adam, and this is just the smallest little piece of the whole theory here, in order to reclaim that, they need to surrender themselves and be born again. That's why they need to be born of spirit. They don't have any spirit. It's open for anything to come in there. The peace that Adam lost has been lost ever since, except for those who come to the realization that they need the Father, they need Yeshua, if it's through conviction or just through the natural passage of time. They've got to be spiritually born. And so what does a spiritless human have? They got a physical body, they are a living soul, but they have no spirit. It hasn't been born yet. Or I think as Wesley said, it's just a dry seed needing to be brought alive by the Holy Spirit. I don't believe that people naturally are spiritually endowed. And I don't, because so many people that I have known in my life, probably the majority, including especially unbelievers, something has taken the place of what Adam lost in there that maybe fits in some way the gap, but isn't the right spirit, is an unclean or evil spirit. And there is such a vast number of different types of evil spirits. It's just not an evil spirit comes in and a person goes crazy and scratches their eyes out. Some are very tame. Some are very animalistic. In fact, most that I've seen or known of have been something like an animal that is tame and not necessarily self-aware. So that's one of the reasons it seems to me that children and teenagers are your best prospects for bringing them into the kingdom, because we know from statistics that children, once they come upon the way, once they become born of spirit, they might go off on a rebellious trail for a while, maybe for decades, and then they will come back. Once they get to a place of emotional maturity, they will come back. We see it time after time. But if that isn't the case, by the time a person gets, to my age, I guess, only a 2% chance that the spirit is able to get through on that person. It's dropped to 2%. And that's because the spirit of the world has taken so much from that person that they can't even consider a walk of faith anymore. They are too far gone. The older you get, the more difficult it is. I don't think that the Spirit of Yahweh forces itself on anyone. Although in this world, there's an ether-like membrane around the world that affects everybody, which is known in theological terms as prevenient grace. Everybody walks in this. Everybody has some influence. They can feel the favor that's upon them by just looking into creation and seeing how beautiful it is, unless, of course, they find themselves in a horrible place in their environment. But anyway, that would take me on to one other topic that I was going to talk about later, and that's the noosphere.
Jackson, can I ask you a question real quick before you continue?
Yeah, I'm done.
It's a bit off topic, kind of, but it regards to last week with your encounter with the Scab man.
Mm-hmm.
I was curious as to where you are now at being, all your whole life experience and stuff. What do you think, if you know what was that, or what do you think that was?
I've tried to still intellectually decide what that thing is, and now I know that a lot of people have experienced that, including Steve McGuire, who after last week's little soiree in the Outer Limits, wrote to me and said that he had encountered a little man like that too. He and his wife, they're every place. Allison our old co-host here on these broadcasts have had experienced them, and people I've met and told that story to down through time have as well. I just don't want to talk about it. I just have to think of the physical fact that I recall. And of course, when you have an experience like that, you can recall it forever. And one of the things that impressed me the most is it looked like a shadow, but it was no shadow. When I hit it with a pipe, I definitely hit something solid. No doubt about it. It was like a little man with a black sheet over his head. You could determine the thing's gait, that it was walking like a human being, and that it had substance, and that it had intelligence when it comes up there with a stick with a light on the end of it, and that it gets hurt, and that it can move fast, and that it initiated the contact. Maybe we should have been more kinder. Maybe we should have welcomed that close encounter. But the first time we encountered it, most of the guides there were so scared they were screaming and crying and everything else. So just my friend and I think we were a little older than the rest of them, that we didn't feel that fear. We just thought, this is amazing. There really is something here. So what is it? I've always been pretty fascinated by the possibility that there were other humanoid type creatures here on Earth that we don't see often. In one experience that out in the country where we had a haunted house and we were having a prayer meeting in there, we invited the deputy sheriff over because what was happening is the guy who owned the house, when he'd go out and work in the yard, especially when it got toward evening, some types of beings come out of the tree and smashed him and slapped him around, knocked him over. And of course, we told the sheriff about this. This has happened to him 3 or 4 times. And so we were praying about it inside, and we talked to the sheriff's deputy, and we knew him. I knew him well at the time, and we asked him to come over, and we finally got him to. And we were looking at him as he was coming in from the car, and he got attacked by some being. And when he did, I never saw a man with a uniform on move so fast to get back in his car. He was able to get back in there, but he was fighting something off there. And I called him afterwards, and he said, I'm never coming back there again. Something attacked me out of that tree. And I said, that's one of the reasons we wanted you to come over, to see if it would happen to you. And so there's some type of entity. We can't believe that's anything else but a physical reality of some kind, that it is in some sense humanoid, that it evidently manifests in that tree. And now come to think of it, the little guy that I was dealing with to disappear, he jumped into a bush and he hid behind a tree, but the tree was a little tree. It wasn't wide enough to disguise his bulk behind it. But he run behind the tree and then he'd just be gone. What is it? I'm still wondering. I don't know.
What stuck out in this when you told it last week, and it did again here, is, most of these, because I've looked into this, just researched it and stuff myself over the years. And one of the common threads seem to be that if people are like awake and coherent when it's happening, they're paralyzed with fear. Like they're, but you two were, and you actually reacted opposite, and you like attacked it.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking, if it was a demonic type of a situation, I mean, you both were believers at this time, right? I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, maybe, there is a spiritual aspect to it. They almost seem like they always, when you tell that story, it reminds me of drones, like pawns in a chessboard almost, just like kind of insignificant and just kind of out there collecting data or doing whatever, but they're not really, other than that, there's not much to them, But did you get a feeling? Do you remember getting did you feel like a oppression, like a spiritual oppression, or was it just a physical type encounter, you think?
At that time, I had been baptized in the Spirit, and I had gone about to heal, or pray for people and try to heal them at that time, and was working in church music ministry. So I was very into the charismatic movement at that time. But that's one thing I don't recall. I do recall being excited about something. And I do recall the adrenaline, but I can't say that I remembered anything spiritual about it. The encounter before that I think I had, I do recall being paralyzed in that, not with fear, just being paralyzed. Kind of like that stage one of a near-death experience where you feel like, well, you're just not going to move. You don't care what happens. And let me tell you also, Steve's encounter was like this. There's something absurd about it. That's another thing. The absurdity. Oh, somebody trying to get in? Okay, let me see. I don't have anybody here trying to get in. The absurdity is when Steve and his wife were driving their van into their carport, and he saw in front of the van in that carport one of these same kind of little guys who was dressed in a tuxedo. Absurd. And the little guy hung out there for a while, and when they began to get out of the car, out of the van, he just walked away. And when they got in the house, one didn't alarm the other one at the time. And then Steve said to his wife, who he thought would tell him he was crazy, "Did you see anything strange out there?" And she said, "I saw a little man in a tuxedo." And I've heard about these little guys and taller guys, the hat men or the shadow men that come dressed up in suits, not unlike you see on The Matrix, those guys in their black suits or whatever they were. They come up to the door. They act like robots. They act like drones. They just come up to get information. There's no emotion in their voice. They don't get excited. But you know, there's something fishy about them. And watching that show the other night, last couple of weeks ago, the one about exposing the government on UFOs and close encounters.
Unacknowledged.
What's it called? Yeah.
Unacknowledged.
Unacknowledged. There was so much in that watching that, not that it shocked you into reality, but there was so much proof there, I thought, that there's something going on. There is some bunches of beings that are out here that in our eyes are acting pretty creepy or are pretty creepy, but are trying to disguise themselves as regular human beings and not always doing such a good job. Haven't you met people in your life that you thought, there's something not right here? Or this person might not be alive. I used to see people, especially on television, that were newscasters and politicians and so forth, on a color TV set back in the late 60s, their faces would turn gray. Everything else would be in color except a face of a person here and there. And I thought, why is that face gray? What is the world trying to tell me about this? So let's hear somebody's comments about that kind of eerie feeling that the person you're trying to talk to isn't really a person at all. Others certainly have thought about this to some extent.
I've seen documentaries on black-eyed kids where there's usually two of them that appear and their eyes are completely black, and testimonies of there's thousands of people that encounter them, but like on their porch, they'll come to outside their door. And the one story in particular I can remember is a woman was in her house and she had two large dogs, like Rottweiler type dogs, very aggressive. And they went to the door and started barking. And then all of a sudden they both stopped, whined, and took off to the other end of the house, wouldn't go near the door. So she opens the door and there's these two children standing on her front porch. And she said immediately she got this horrific feeling of just utter terror. And they asked something about if she had seen their mother or something odd like that. And she just slammed the door and hid. I mean, they didn't try to come in or anything, and there's been stories of people like in a grocery store parking lot, after they put their groceries away, they'll get in their car and all of a sudden standing outside their car door window will be one or two of these children. And they don't even say anything, they just stare at them. But they said that they feel like there's no soul in them. They're just empty. They like exude evil,
You have surfed to Jackson Snyder Presents, produced by the Vero Essene Yahad, a Hebrew Nation radio original. We'll be right back after this break. clouds of glory. Jackson Snyder Presents is back.
Yom Teruah is the day of war.
I had an experience when I was in third grade. This kid, I lived in Michigan. This kid, he was a neighborhood kid. He had the strangest eyes. He had like these golden kind of eyes and this really curly hair. He almost kind of looked African American, but not.
Yeah.
His skin was lighter. But anyway, I don't remember how I met him, but one day we were out, playing out in the woods and stuff. And all of a sudden, there was a park and he stood on one of the swings and his demeanor completely changed. And he grabbed my chin and he picked my chin up. And so I was looking at him and I was horrified. I can remember feeling just absolutely terrified. And he told me that there was a chair in my room, in my bedroom at home. And he said, behind that chair at midnight tonight, there'll be 3 angel women there. Oh. And you're to go behind that chair and you're to have sex with them. And I was in third grade. And he said, but you're not to look at their face, because if you look at their face, they'll kill you. And I was absolutely terrified and horror. I've got goose flesh right now just talking to the story. And I was crying as a child. I can remember crying and I couldn't really say anything. And he just kind of stared at me, let my face go. And that was it. We just continued to play or hang out. We didn't really play, but hung out, for as long as I could tolerate being around him. But then I just left and I never saw the kid again. Of course, I slept with mom and dad for the next,
No, I bet. You didn't see any angels behind the chair, right?
I didn't even, brother, I wouldn't have looked. I wouldn't have had the courage to even look. You know what I mean? But seriously, that to me, that had to be some kind of a demonic thing. I mean, that's just not something a kid in third grade comes off and, there was something there, because I can distinctly remember that there was some kind of he just wasn't some mean kid. It's just, there was something going on. So,
yeah. Well, I'm trying to think, how does our faith enter into some of these stories? I'm thinking about that Yeshua came to destroy the works of the evil one. And it seems to me that his primary ministry was that of casting out demons or accosting demons. Look, when he accosts the scribes and Pharisees in 3 or 4 chapters in Matthew, those people might have been that kind of person, a spiritless automaton of some type. But evil is more than casting demons out of people. Evil is an entity in itself. And if these evil creatures that Yeshua told us about are 4th dimensional creatures, then couldn't they, as Sagan said, materialize at will and tear you inside and out, from inside to out? But yet, at the same time, I think that there is a prohibition against them tearing you inside out. I think that there is a cosmic prohibition, a spiritual prohibition that Elohim has put on this creation that allows them to mess with your mind, but doesn't allow them to kill you. Kind of like, look at Job, the devil was permitted to do anything he wanted with Job except kill him. And he did. But I can't think of any instances in the scripture, except at those times where angels occur to give, or angels come to give somebody a message or lead someone around, in which there were artificial people. And so that's what I'm thinking. Sean, you gave me a good idea there about the automatons or robots, because it seems to me that that's what they're acting like, drones. There's some mission they're sent out to do, and they do it. Let's look at the chat here. Mastema in Jubilees 10 and his request to Elohim to allow 1/10 of them to remain to punish the sons of men who stray from the laws of Elohim. Good memory on that. That's Jubilees 10. It'll be worth looking at when we get done here. And Professor Smith also says that these entities are the spawn of fallen angels according to Enoch and Jubilees. And I would agree with that, but I think it's more than that. There's something more than that. There's something freaky wrong here, that unless we open our eyes and start believing our lies, believing our eyes, we will have missed this whole other conception of thing. That's funny that you would pick out mastema as well. Is that actually the title in Jubilees? Oh, you're going to talk about it on Shabbat. That's good. I want to look up and see what mastema actually means. I was thinking that that is a more Oriental mastema. Oh, it says it's the angel who appears in the book of Jubilees, carrying the punishments of God, as well as tempting humans and testing their faith. He's found in the Zadokite fragments, angel of disaster, father of all evil, and a flatterer of God. He is said to have become a fallen angel. He first appears in the literature of the Second Temple period as a personification of the Hebrew word mastema, meaning hatred, hostility, enmity, or persecution. I'm thinking, was Satan called mastema in the Dead Sea Scrolls? I remember Beliar or Belial. And according to the book of Jubilees, mastema is the chief of the Nephilim. And of course, like you said, Professor Smith, these are the demons engendered by fallen angels called watchers with human women. But you might recall that it also says that these things had intimate relations with all kinds of different flesh. These things could take on a human type phenotype because half of it would be a human genotype and the other phenotype of whatever they had matched with. It wouldn't have to be the same. It wouldn't have to be the same type of being. And of course, it seems to me that this would take us right around to talking about transhumanism, which is certainly a scourge. I feel like there has been transhumanism going on for a long time that we just don't know about. The mixing of human genetics with that of other living creatures. Oh, I just got done reading a novel about that. I never know what their names are. I listen to them in audiobooks. They come and go. The thing that has been is a thing which shall be, and there is no new thing under the sun. Just as it was written in the days of Noah, so shall it be in the days of the coming of the Son of Man. Amen. Perhaps we should get out Jubilees a little more. And since last week, I purchased a couple of books that were recommended on that recording by some of you folks. I have one of them right here. You know, I've read slews of books about demons and casting out demons. I've worked in that for a long time. But this is one of the authors that was spoken of last week, Jason Offutt, and the book is Darkness Walks, the Shadow People Among Us. And I got another one about the Hat Men. It's in the other room, though, hoping that will bring some light to these little creatures. But when I saw them on the motion picture Communion, the little creature, no, I bet they don't. Those little creatures on Communion just immediately flipped a switch in my mind. And I thought, yeah, that's the one. That's what I saw. I thought Communion was an incredible story, an incredible movie. It's so strange, though, that these entities don't kill anybody that we know of. Something else it does well in that arena is blessed salt. This is like a medicine for demons in the house that nobody can detect. I have used that blessed salt to chase demons through 4 stories in a church and down through the crawl space. When you toss, you couldn't see the demons, but when you toss the salt on them, you could see fiery sparks coming out. But that's another story. Or use them if you come into a house, especially a house of a family member, and you know someone in there is a demonic wretch, a beater of the family. You can spread that salt around in their bedroom or even in their bed. And of course, I've known demons to flee on account of that. I believe in one particular case, that salt killed somebody. Does this sound crazy to you? Sometimes you got to get wild to break people out of the stupor these entities have them under.
Brother Jackson?
Is this Gregory?
Yes, it is.
Oh, what you have to say tonight?
Well, how do you get blessed salt?
You get you some salt, you go in a quiet room, utter the blessing over it, tell it what it's supposed to do, and name the name Yeshua. I have directions for doing that. If you're interested, I'll send them over to you.
Okay, yeah. And I would like to maybe make another comment too.
Please.
I had listened to one of your teachings probably maybe 6 months to a year ago, and it had been, I think you did the teaching a few years back, but it was on the creation story of, of Genesis 1 through Genesis 2, verse 2. And there, it talks about he created us and then we became a living nefesh. And there's almost like chapter 1 is a different creation from
That's
Genesis
right.
chapter 2. And when I listened to that's the first time I ever heard that, and I really was blessed by that teaching. And would any of that come into play on some of the things that we're talking about this evening?
Absolutely, it does. But that's a pretty difficult.
Very deep.
And people just reject it. But if you look at the two accounts of creation, you will find them diametrically opposed.
Yes.
They say
And-
one is another account of the other, but they're diametrically opposed in the first creation that we have there. Men and women created he them, even though the word isn't created there. There's actually two words used in that Genesis 1. And we never see the spirit of Elohim blown into those people.
Yeah.
The second creation then is Adam and Chava, and into Adam, there's something new. They're set apart. That's why they're put in an Eden. And then they are let out to be among these other Homo sapien. But I don't consider Adam and Eve to be Homo sapien, but to be a kind of a subspecies, Homo Uranos, that is, people of the sky. And when we get to Enoch's Animal Apocalypse, the writer of that shows us how the perfected, should I say Zerah, the perfected seed, the perfected blood of Adam went down through the generations, through the first 2 millennia, moving into the first century AD. And you can see with those two teachings that you can receive through your genetic structure or your morphic structure, one or the other, what your brothers say didn't. You can see that there was foreknowledge or predestination in regards to your genetic makeup because you are receptive to the Spirit, and maybe your brother or sister is opposed to it. Or that some parents hate God and still you came out longing for Elohim. That is a very good teaching to explain things like that. I'm glad you brought that up.
One of the things that separates those is the ability to do teshuvah or to turn, repent, and change. Don't you think that's a big part of it?
Every person has the opportunity to do that. That's why people need to be born again. But not everybody takes the opportunity. And if they don't, still, you have the resurrection of the dead and the judgment. You let the judge sort them out then, because everything that they've ever done or ever thought is going to be considered. These are not human judges. These are judges that know everything. And if that person is considered to be able to be rehabilitated, then they go on to life again in what we might call the gospel age, along with those that are resurrected from the dead even before they die, who will be teaching them. I have a whole concept of the millennium day that before my mind completely goes, I would like to record again to help people understand that because you thought a person was going to hell, they aren't necessarily going to hell. The resurrection of the dead shows you that everyone will be judged except those that have already been prejudged. John says that people like us, we never die. Never die. And then there are two other classes. There are the good are resurrected to life. They're back on earth. You will be having your little place, your little outpost on earth, and you will get a little telegram from the government. It's going to say, hey, grandma's coming home. Get ready for her. Here's a $35 check. Build a mayon, a room onto your house, because grandma's coming to stay. Teach her the things of Elohim. See how she does. Maybe a couple years later, you're going to get another check for $3,500. Is this absurd? Build another mansion, a mayon, a room onto your house, because grandpa's coming home there. And maybe you'll write into the government and say, but where's my nasty brother? And you'll get a letter back very shortly, maybe in an email, and it'll say, I'm sorry, but he didn't make it. Everything they've ever done is going to be judged. But just like here on earth, not all judgments end up in condemnation. In fact, where it says there are the good in John chapter 5, should read that again starting at 19. There are those that will never die, number one. Number two, those that are good will be resurrected to life. And then number three, those who are evil will be resurrected, not to damnation. That's a mistranslation by a long way, but to a trial. Krisis. Krisis is a legal term for a trial. Yeah, one says judgment, one says condemnation, one says damnation. They want to keep it in that realm, but if they use the term that is really meant in English by krisis, Krisis, then they'll see that it's a legal term meaning a trial. So you're say, oh, the pastor always told me my boy was going to hell. He was so evil. You can say, well, we don't know because of the resurrection of the dead. Is Elohim going to throw your son in hell and then pull him back out again just to throw him back in? Now that is ridiculous. Do you believe in the resurrection of the dead? This is a bodily resurrection of the dead. And the judgment. Do you believe that the judge is fair? Especially when you have you have an attorney that's both the defense and the prosecutor and loves you. So in this time, all evil, we are promised, is going to be sucked away. And right now, I think what you're seeing is evil coming to seed and sprouting. You have to open a wound and expose the cancer before you can cut it out of there. And brother, sister, the cancer is coming out these days out of every pore, especially in this last 150 years. Every pore, the cancer is coming out, and it won't be long till it'll be all bagged up and thrown into an abyss. And we will work here as the resurrected, non-dying people, working for an earth full of people that want to come to know the master of the world. And we will be successful. We can't call what they call the church age the gospel age. We have done a very poor job. But in those days, no evil, no devil, the demons will go away. Read your scripture. That's what it says. But we've been so brainwashed with these Catholic and Baptist ideas. They were useful at the time to keep people in church, but it would be best off in our day to tell the truth. Thank you so much. Agree. I would like to write that up sometime. That's just the tip of the iceberg. So look, we've got to pause here, and time is up anyway. Gee, who did I see there? I think I saw Greg Drugsma.
I pushed the wrong button.
Did you catch your beard a little bit?
Yeah, a little bit.
Okay, great. Well, I thank you for coming. We'll leave off and we'll take this up again next week. I'm sorry we get off the we get off the course here, but you've got to do some talking too. You've got to think about these things ahead of time. Let me ask you, look into the omega point theory for next time. Omega point theory, or Frank Tipler, or Wolfhart Pannenberg. In fact, I have a list here. I'm going to just put it on the chat. If you want to get more into the subject from a theological scientific viewpoint, take a look at this list. Now, instead of maybe watching, what do people watch these days? Gilligan's Island. Look up some of these people and the omega point theory. One more I need. Look up Eben Alexander. One more term. Maybe I lost it. Oh, these two terms bring science so close to our faith. Morphic Field's noosphere, and there was a great coming together of theology and science. The top scientist a few years ago in the 90s, the top scientist, Frank Tipler, and the top theologian, Wolfhart Pannenberg, got together and they compared notes. Tipler on the omega point theory, Pannenberg on the Bible theory, and they shook hands. Tipler, an atheist, was converted to Christianity. Pannenberg, on the other hand, was converted to science, and they both lived happily ever after. I'll be with you all. Love you. See you next time. Oh, are we having something Thursday night?
Yes, 9 p.m.
All right, got it.
You have been listening to Jackson Snyder Presents on Hebrew Nation Radio.
stand for peace, but they are for war. I speak for peace, but war is all the more. My soul has dwelt with him who longs for war. So deliver me from my dwelling in the sands, from the tongue and its demands, from the mighty's bloody hands, to your peaceful Beulah lands. For that wild and craven beast, his war will never cease, but I stand for peace. So deliver me from my dwelling in the the sands, from the tongue and its demands, from the mighty's bloody hands, to your peaceful Beulah lands. For that wild and craven beast, its war will never cease, but